The morning has already begun by the time the door slides open. Shoes wait along the wall, aligned carefully, their surfaces worn smooth by years of use. Outside, the air carries a quiet coolness, neither sharp nor heavy, just present. A kettle warms on the stove without being watched. No one is waiting for it to boil. It will do that on its own. A man steps out onto the street, a small bag resting lightly against his side. His movement is unhurried, not because there is nowhere to be, but because there is no need to arrive aggressively. A neighbor is already sweeping the same narrow stretch of pavement he swept yesterday, and the day before that. The broom moves in slow arcs, gathering what the wind returned overnight. They exchange a brief nod. No words are needed. Both understand where the other is headed. In places like this, life does not announce itself. It continues. The day is already in motion, carried forward by routines so familiar they no longer feel like choices. The body moves first. Thought follows later, if it follows at all. Hands reach for what they know will be there. Feet turn instinctively toward paths that have been walked thousands of times. An elderly woman pauses near the corner, shifting the strap of her bag so it sits more comfortably on her shoulder. Her steps are shorter now, careful in a way they were not before, yet there is no hesitation in them. She has walked this route for decades. The surface has changed. The buildings have changed. Her pace has changed. The walk itself remains. She greets the shop owner as he lifts the shutters, the metal rising with a familiar rattle. They exchange a few quiet words, nothing urgent, nothing new. Still, both linger a moment longer than necessary, as if the act of seeing one another completes something essential. Happiness is not a word that circulates often here. It feels too broad, too loud for the way life unfolds. What matters more is continuity. Waking up with something to attend to. Going to sleep knowing tomorrow will offer another small reason to rise. The meaning of a day is not extracted through reflection or analysis. It is embedded directly into the doing of it. Work begins without ceremony. Gardens are tended, not to impress, but to keep them alive. Food is prepared in kitchens where the movements have been refined over generations. Tools are lifted, set down, cleaned, and returned to their places. The tasks are modest. Some are repetitive. None are treated as interruptions to life. They are life, given shape through repetition. There is a particular calm that settles over people who know why they are where they are, even if they never name the reason aloud. It shows in how they stand while waiting. In how they listen without planning a response. In how they finish what they start, even when no one is watching. Effort is present, but struggle is rare. The body relaxes when it understands its place in the flow of things. Age is not resisted here. It arrives gradually, like the weather, altering the texture of days without demanding attention. Older hands move more slowly, but with confidence. Younger hands observe without being instructed, learning through proximity rather than explanation. Knowledge passes quietly, absorbed through repetition rather than taught directly. The day is shaped by balance instead of ambition. There is work, but it does not consume the whole self. There is rest, but it is not an escape. Meals are simple and shared. Conversation unfolds naturally, then gives way to silence without discomfort. Time does not feel like something to outrun. It feels like something to move within. What keeps people moving forward is not excitement or constant novelty. It is something quieter, something that lives just beneath the surface of ordinary life. A reason that does not shout. A pull that does not demand explanation. It is felt in the decision to keep showing up, even when the outcome is predictable. It lives in the small satisfaction of completing a task well, not for praise, but because it feels right to leave it finished. Difficulty is not absent. Bodies ache. Loss arrives. Weather turns without warning. Yet there is a resilience woven into daily life. When something breaks, it is repaired if possible. When it cannot be repaired, it is accepted without unnecessary resistance. Attention returns to what can still be done. The mind settles when it is no longer asked to invent meaning each day. Meaning is already there, reinforced through routine. It does not need to be chased. It needs to be entered. Not through effortful thinking, but through participation. As the morning advances, the street fills slightly, though it never feels crowded. People pass one another with brief acknowledgments, each carrying their own purpose without needing to explain it. The world does not ask anyone here to be extraordinary. It only asks that they remain present. Somewhere between the first warm drink and the next small task, something subtle takes hold. A sense that life, when lived this way, stretches outward rather than closing in. That longevity is not simply about adding years at the end, but about adding depth to the middle. A long life is not built through dramatic gestures. It is built through attention, through care, through the quiet commitment to what gives each day its shape. No one pauses to define this force. It is felt in the hands, in the posture, in the familiar weight of the hours ahead. It does not promise happiness. It promises continuity. It promises that tomorrow will offer another chance to take part. And so the morning continues, unremarkable and complete, carrying within it the same quiet answer it has always held. By midday, the light has shifted its angle, thinning as it slips between rooftops and settles across the floor in long, pale shapes. Hands slow almost instinctively. Not from fatigue, but from recognition. There is a moment when the body knows it is time to pause, and it responds without needing instruction. Bowls are set out on low tables marked by years of use. Steam rises gently, carrying familiar scents that do not surprise anyone. Eating begins quietly. No one rushes. No one lingers excessively either. Each movement has found its natural pace. The body receives what it needs and signals when enough has been reached. This way of eating shapes the body over time. Portions remain modest, leaving room for movement afterward. The stomach feels supported rather than burdened. Hunger arrives predictably and fades cleanly. Balance is maintained not through rules, but through attention. The body has learned to speak clearly, and it is listened to. After the meal, there is no collapse into rest. There is a gentle return to motion. Walking resumes. Tools are lifted again. Muscles warm easily because they have not cooled completely. Energy circulates rather than spiking and crashing. The day continues without friction. Movement here is not framed as exercise. It is simply how life unfolds. Walking is how one travels. Stretching happens naturally when stiffness appears. Strength is maintained through daily use rather than deliberate strain. The body remains engaged because it is needed, not because it is being trained. As years pass, this engagement protects mobility. Steps shorten, but they do not stop. Pace slows, but direction remains clear. Adjustments are made without self-judgment. What matters is not how fast something is done, but that it continues to be done at all. The mind mirrors this steadiness. Attention narrows naturally toward what is directly in front of the body. A knife meeting a cutting board. A broom gathering dust along a familiar edge. A pen tracing characters with practiced care. Thought quiets because it has somewhere to rest. In these moments, time loosens. Hours pass without being measured. There is no tension between effort and ease. They blend together, creating a state where action feels both purposeful and light. Not because the task lacks importance, but because resistance has dissolved. When focus drifts, it returns gently. There is no irritation in the lapse. Wandering is understood as part of attention, not a failure of it. Returning becomes a simple act, practiced so often it requires no effort. Over time, concentration deepens without force. There is satisfaction in this depth. It does not arrive as excitement. It settles quietly, like warmth spreading through the body. Pride is unnecessary. The reward is felt while the work is happening, in the sense of being fully engaged. Social life weaves itself through these hours. Brief exchanges happen naturally. A comment offered. A question answered. A shared observation acknowledged with a nod. These interactions are small, but they reinforce belonging. Each person is reminded that their efforts exist within a shared rhythm. Isolation is rare, not because people are constantly together, but because connection is built into the structure of the day. Familiar faces appear regularly. Familiar voices mark the passing of time. Trust grows through repetition rather than declaration. As the afternoon advances, fatigue is noticed early. The body signals for adjustment, and the pace responds. Tasks are shifted. Movements soften. There is no honor attached to pushing past limits. Endurance is measured across years, not hours. This long view shapes decisions quietly. Choices favor sustainability over intensity. Short bursts that threaten long balance are avoided instinctively. The future is considered without anxiety, treated as an extension of the present rather than a separate demand. Toward late afternoon, work begins to close. Tools are cleaned carefully. Surfaces are returned to order. The act of finishing is given as much attention as beginning. Even tasks left incomplete are positioned deliberately, ready to be resumed without resistance. There is a calm satisfaction in this closure. Not triumph, not relief, but a steady sense that the day has been handled well. The body feels used, not drained. The mind feels occupied, not crowded. Outside, shadows lengthen again. The light softens. Evening approaches without urgency. The day folds back into itself, complete in its ordinariness, carried forward by the same quiet force that has guided it from the start. Night settles gradually, not as a sudden change but as a soft layering of quiet. Sounds loosen first. Then light recedes. Finally, the body gives permission to slow. Doors slide closed with a familiar hush. Futons are laid out carefully, their placement guided by long habit rather than thought. Rest is entered deliberately, not collapsed into. The mind does not review the day in search of errors. There is little reason to judge what has already been lived. Small imperfections dissolve into repetition, softened by the knowledge that tomorrow will offer another chance to adjust. Nothing needs to be carried forward with urgency. This repetition shapes a particular relationship with time. Life is not experienced as a series of sharp rises and falls. It unfolds as an accumulation of ordinary moments, each complete in itself. Meaning does not wait at a distant milestone. It is reinforced daily, through continuity. When people here speak of long lives, they do so without fascination. Longevity is treated as practical, almost expected. It grows from habits that do not strain the body. From food that nourishes without excess. From movement that continues without force. From social bonds that prevent isolation from taking root. There is little frantic striving. Ambition exists, but it is contained. Improvement is pursued gently, through refinement rather than expansion. Doing something slightly better than before is enough. Mastery is valued not for recognition, but for the quiet satisfaction it provides. Challenges are met with the same restraint. Difficulties are not dramatized. They are addressed step by step. When solutions do not appear immediately, they are allowed time. Waiting is not mistaken for failure. Acceptance stands beside effort, steady and patient. Purpose, in this way of living, is not discovered through searching. It becomes visible through engagement. It reveals itself in what consistently draws attention and care, even when no reward is offered. It lives in the things one continues to do, long after novelty has faded. Some find it in tending plants that require daily attention. Others in preparing meals that nourish familiar faces. Others still in repairing objects that might otherwise be discarded. The form changes. The feeling does not. There is alignment between action and self. This alignment builds resilience. When circumstances shift, direction remains. Actions adapt without erasing meaning. Purpose flexes rather than breaks, grounded in values rather than outcomes. It survives changes in health, status, and environment. Community reinforces this stability. People are known across time. Histories are shared without being recorded. When someone falters, support appears without spectacle. Help is offered naturally, as part of the shared fabric, not as an interruption to it. There is dignity in being needed, regardless of scale. Even small contributions matter because they support something ongoing. Work may change form over time, but involvement continues. There is always a way to remain connected. As years pass, fear of aging softens. The future is not imagined as sudden decline, but as gradual adjustment. Abilities transform, but relevance remains. One phase gives way to another without erasing what came before. In the hours before sleep deepens, thought drifts gently rather than racing. The body feels grounded, held by routine. There is no urge to escape the present moment. It has proven itself sufficient, again and again. Outside, streets rest in darkness, preparing quietly for another morning that will arrive already in motion. Inside, breath slows. Muscles release. The day settles without leaving sharp edges behind. The quiet force that has carried everything forward remains, steady and unassuming, ready to move again when morning returns. Morning returns without announcement. Light presses gently against the edges of the room, and the body responds before thought fully forms. Rising does not feel like a choice weighed against comfort. It feels like a continuation, the next movement in a sequence that has already proven itself. Outside, the air carries the subtle signature of the season. In warmer months, windows are opened early, letting the day in. In cooler ones, layers are added without complaint. The body adjusts easily because it has learned to respond rather than resist. Comfort is not created by controlling conditions, but by meeting them as they are. Breakfast is prepared with quiet care. Portions are small enough to keep the body light, yet sufficient to sustain it. Eating stops before fullness becomes heaviness. This restraint is not enforced. It is felt. Over time, the body has learned where balance lives, and it is trusted to signal when enough has been reached. That trust extends inward. Sensations are noticed early. Fatigue is acknowledged before it becomes exhaustion. Discomfort is met with adjustment rather than denial. This attentiveness builds cooperation between body and mind, replacing tension with familiarity. Health is maintained quietly, through listening rather than intervention. Work begins again, shaped by repetition. There is a particular quality to tasks performed daily over many years. The steps dissolve into motion. What once required concentration now unfolds almost automatically. The hands know where to go. The body remembers what the mind no longer needs to instruct. In this state, attention settles naturally. Distraction loses its urgency. The task itself becomes absorbing, not because it is exciting, but because it is complete. The mind rests within the boundaries of the action, supported by rhythm rather than driven by effort. When attention drifts, it returns without friction. There is no frustration in the lapse. Wandering is expected. Returning is practiced. Over time, this gentle cycle strengthens focus more effectively than force ever could. Concentration becomes resilient because it is renewed daily. The satisfaction that grows from this engagement is steady and understated. It does not rise and fall sharply. It lingers, creating a background sense of well-being. Accomplishment is internal. The reward is the feeling of being present while the work unfolds. Midday brings another pause, felt rather than scheduled. Conversation resumes briefly. Meals are shared again, reinforcing bonds that have been shaped over time. These interactions are simple, but they matter. They remind each person that their efforts exist within a shared world. Connection here does not require constant affirmation. Familiarity provides its own reassurance. Seeing the same faces day after day builds trust without effort. Social life feels stable because it is woven into routine rather than set apart from it. As the afternoon progresses, awareness of limits remains clear. Tasks are completed within reasonable bounds. When energy fades, pace adjusts. There is no pride in overextending. Endurance is measured in years, not in hours pushed beyond comfort. This long view influences decisions quietly. Short-term gains that threaten long balance are avoided without debate. Choices favor sustainability over intensity. The future is considered without anxiety, treated as a continuation shaped by today's care. Later, as the day begins to close, tools are cleaned and returned to their places. Surfaces are cleared. Spaces are set in order. Finishing is treated with the same respect as beginning. Even what remains unfinished is left deliberately, positioned to be resumed without resistance. There is peace in this deliberate incompleteness. Not everything must be resolved at once. Life is allowed to remain open. Tomorrow does not press in with urgency because it will be met the same way today was, with steady attention. As evening approaches, the body feels gently used. Muscles carry a familiar weight. The mind feels occupied but clear. The day recedes without struggle, making space for the quieter hours ahead. Evening gathers slowly, easing its way into the spaces the day has prepared. Lamps are lit one at a time, their glow soft and contained. The transition is so gradual it barely registers. The body recognizes it before the mind does. The pace naturally loosens. Dinner is prepared without haste. Ingredients are handled with familiarity, lifted and set down with quiet confidence. There is no need to check instructions. The hands already know the order. The meal is simple, but it feels complete. Each element supports the body without weighing it down, offering nourishment rather than indulgence. Eating is unhurried. Conversation, if it appears, stays close to the moment. A comment about the day. A shared observation. Then silence returns easily, settling between people without discomfort. Presence fills the space words leave behind. Afterward, there is gentle movement. A short walk to loosen the body. Dishes washed and set to dry. Small tasks attended to, not because they are urgent, but because they belong here, in this part of the day. These actions signal closure. They tell the body that effort has been met and can now be released. Sleep approaches as a continuation rather than an escape. The body settles because it has not been pushed beyond its limits. Breath slows naturally. Muscles soften. The mind drifts without clinging to unfinished thoughts. Dreams come and go lightly, without carrying the weight of urgency. This cycle, repeated over years, creates stability that does not depend on control. Life does not feel like something that must be constantly corrected or optimized. It feels inhabitable. There is room for missteps without collapse. There is space for change without disruption. Over time, this steadiness reshapes how purpose is experienced. It is no longer expected to arrive as a revelation. It reveals itself gradually, through repetition. The things a person continues to return to, even when they offer no recognition, begin to outline what matters most. There is relief in this realization. Life does not need to be extraordinary to be meaningful. It needs to be aligned. When actions reflect values, even quietly, a sense of rightness settles in. It does not demand attention. It simply remains. Aging unfolds within this alignment. Roles shift. Capabilities change. Yet usefulness does not disappear. It adapts. When strength fades, experience fills the space it leaves behind. When speed slows, judgment sharpens. Contribution continues in new forms. There is comfort in knowing that relevance does not expire suddenly. It evolves. A person is not defined by a single peak, but by the continuity of their engagement. This continuity becomes a source of calm as years accumulate. Outside, night deepens. Inside, the body recognizes the familiar signals of rest. There is no inventory of what was accomplished. No tally of what was missed. The day is allowed to be complete as it was lived. As sleep settles fully, the quiet force that guides this life remains present even in stillness. It does not disappear when activity ends. It rests alongside the body, patient and reliable, ready to be taken up again with the first movements of morning. In the hours before dawn, the world holds itself gently. Streets lie still, not empty, but resting. Inside, sleep moves in slow rhythms, deepening and releasing without instruction. The body shifts when it needs to, adjusting its weight, finding comfort again. Nothing is forced. Rest completes itself naturally. When waking comes, it does not arrive as an interruption. Awareness returns gradually, like light spreading across a surface that has always been there. The body recognizes the moment before the mind names it. Rising feels like joining something already underway rather than starting anew. Over time, this rhythm shapes identity in subtle ways. A person comes to know themselves through repetition, through the quiet accumulation of days lived with attention. The self is not constructed through declarations or ambition. It is revealed through what is done consistently, even when no one is watching. This steadiness alters how stress is held. Pressure still exists, but it does not linger unchecked. Tension is released through movement, through conversation, through rest taken at the right moment. Problems are met close to when they appear, preventing them from settling too deeply. The nervous system is allowed to recover daily, rather than being held in constant alert. Food continues to support this balance quietly. Meals are chosen for how they sustain the body over time, not for intensity alone. Eating becomes an act of care, guided by awareness rather than indulgence or control. Flavors are appreciated fully because excess is absent. Satisfaction arrives without heaviness. Pleasure, here, is not isolated into rare peaks. It is distributed across ordinary moments. There is enjoyment in familiarity, in small variations within routine. Seasonal changes are noticed. Subtle improvements are felt. The return of something known brings comfort rather than boredom. The mind, shaped by this pace, grows less reactive. Thoughts arise and pass without demanding immediate response. Worry appears, is acknowledged, then set aside. Attention returns to what can be done now. Emotional responses soften without losing depth. This emotional steadiness strengthens resilience. Loss and uncertainty still arrive, but they do not overwhelm. Feelings are experienced fully, then allowed to move through. Nothing is held longer than necessary. The inner landscape remains open, flexible enough to accommodate change. Relationships benefit from this openness. Conflicts are addressed early, without escalation. Differences are acknowledged without becoming threats. Respect remains intact even when agreement does not. Trust deepens through consistency rather than reassurance. Over time, trust extends inward as well. Decisions are made with confidence, grounded in lived experience. There is less need for external validation. Approval gives way to alignment. A choice feels right because it fits the rhythm that has already been established. This internal trust eases anxiety about the future. Challenges are expected, but they are not feared. The skills needed to meet them are already being practiced daily. Adaptation is not reserved for crisis. It is ongoing, quiet, reliable. As memory accumulates, life feels textured rather than segmented. Moments blur together, yet their overall tone remains clear. Fulfillment emerges not from highlights, but from continuity. There is a sense of having lived fully without needing to prove it. Morning tasks begin again. The kettle warms. Shoes wait by the door. Outside, familiar paths prepare to receive familiar steps. Nothing about this moment calls attention to itself, yet it carries the same quiet significance as every other. The day moves forward, supported by habits that have earned trust over time. Purpose does not need to be named. It is already active, expressed through care, through movement, through the simple decision to continue. As the day unfolds, attention moves smoothly from one task to the next, without friction. Nothing stands alone. Each action prepares the ground for what follows. Cleaning leads naturally into arranging. Arranging gives way to preparing. Preparing makes room for sharing. The sequence carries itself, needing no supervision. Energy is treated with care, not guarded anxiously or spent recklessly. It circulates. When it flows steadily, there is no urgency to conserve it, and no temptation to exhaust it. The body learns its own economy, giving effort where it matters and recovering without guilt when it does not. Over time, this creates an intimate form of self-knowledge. It becomes clear which activities leave the body quietly replenished and which leave it strained. Without formal decisions, life begins to organize itself around this awareness. What drains without returning something essential is softened or released. What sustains, even subtly, is protected. This narrowing of focus does not feel like loss. It feels like refinement. As unnecessary demands fall away, clarity emerges. The mind feels less crowded. Desire simplifies. Satisfaction becomes easier to reach because it no longer depends on accumulation or comparison. Work, in this refined space, takes on a different quality. It becomes less about output and more about presence. The value of an action is felt while it is happening, not deferred to a future result. This allows even modest tasks to carry weight. Meaning arrives in real time. The body responds to this alignment with quiet strength. It remains active without being pushed. It changes with age, but it does not withdraw. Movement continues in forms adapted to experience rather than driven by force. The body becomes an ally, offering guidance instead of resistance. Mental clarity follows. Thoughts slow enough to be noticed. Concerns still appear, but they do not take over. There is space around them. They can be held briefly, then set down. Attention returns easily to what is present. Time itself feels different here. Days are no longer units to be filled or endured. They feel like environments to inhabit. Impatience fades because the pace of life feels appropriate to the body moving through it. There is no sense of being left behind or needing to catch up. Relationships deepen within this steadiness. They are not rushed. They grow through repeated contact and shared rhythm. Trust forms slowly, becoming durable rather than fragile. Space can be given without fear of distance. Presence remains even in absence. This sense of belonging softens loneliness. Even when alone, a person feels connected to a wider pattern of life. There is reassurance in knowing that others are moving through similar days, guided by similar rhythms, even if they are not nearby. Challenges, when they arise, are met with the same calm. There is less impulse to react dramatically. Responses are shaped by experience rather than alarm. Problems are broken into manageable steps and addressed patiently. Waiting does not feel like failure. It feels like part of the process. This patience is active. It is rooted in trust. Trust in continuity. Trust in effort applied consistently. Trust that small actions, repeated, eventually create change. Fear loosens its hold, freeing energy for what can actually be done. In quieter moments, reflection happens naturally. Not as analysis, but as noticing. Patterns become visible. It becomes clear how small choices, repeated daily, shape the direction of a life. There is comfort in this realization. Transformation does not require force. Attention is enough. Evening approaches again, familiar and unremarkable. The day has unfolded without spectacle, yet it feels complete. Tasks have been met. Connections maintained. The body has been used and cared for. Nothing more is demanded. As light fades, the rhythm holds. Another cycle prepares to close, carrying with it the accumulated weight of countless similar days. Together, they form a life that feels coherent, sustained by a quiet force that never seeks recognition. It only asks to be lived. There are moments, often unnoticed at first, when awareness shifts slightly. It might happen while rinsing a cup, feeling the warmth of the water pass over the hands, or while folding cloth that has softened with age. The movement continues on its own, and the mind settles into the ease of it. Nothing is missing from the moment. Nothing is being postponed. These moments do not arrive as realizations. They pass quietly, leaving behind a faint sense of rightness. Over time, they gather, creating familiarity with being at ease inside one's own life. Contentment, here, is not a surge of feeling. It is the absence of resistance. The rhythm that allows this ease is not rigid. It bends. Seasons change, and with them the shape of days. Light arrives earlier, then later. Tasks shift. The body responds. Stability does not come from sameness, but from the ability to adjust without losing direction. This responsiveness becomes essential when life introduces disruption. Illness, loss, limitation appear without warning. When they do, the habits that once supported effort begin to support recovery. Attention turns inward. Pace softens. Rest is given the same legitimacy as work. There is no embarrassment in this slowing. Vulnerability is not treated as a personal failure. It is understood as part of the shared human rhythm. When someone falters, others adapt naturally. Responsibilities are redistributed. Support appears quietly, without announcement. This collective adjustment strengthens individual resilience. Knowing that support exists reduces fear. Difficulty can be faced directly because it does not have to be carried alone. Suffering is acknowledged rather than hidden. Healing becomes a shared process, woven into daily life. Within this environment, purpose reveals its flexibility. It is no longer tied to constant output or visible contribution. It becomes a willingness to remain engaged in whatever form engagement can take. On some days, this means doing. On others, it means listening. Sometimes it means simply being present. This flexibility protects meaning from collapse. When circumstances change, value does not disappear. It shifts. A person who can no longer perform a familiar task may still guide, observe, or encourage. Contribution transforms without losing its essence. The body follows this transformation. Movements grow smaller, but they remain intentional. Strength gives way to precision. Speed gives way to timing. Even within limitation, agency remains. The body is not abandoned. It is accompanied. Attention to the present continues to anchor experience. Thoughts of regret or worry arise, then loosen their grip. The mind is gently returned to what is available now. This return grows easier with practice. The present proves itself again and again as enough. In this sufficiency, fear softens. The future no longer appears as a sharp break from the present. It feels like an extension, shaped by the same care that has carried everything so far. Uncertainty remains, but it does not dominate. As evening approaches once more, familiar gestures signal the close of the day. Muscles relax. Breath deepens. There is a quiet appreciation, not formed into words, for another day lived within its limits. Night settles gently. The world grows still. Inside, there is no need to hold on. The day has been integrated fully, leaving nothing sharp enough to disturb rest. Sleep arrives as a natural continuation of the rhythm. Even in stillness, the quiet force remains present. It does not rush. It does not recede. It waits, steady and reliable, ready to move again with the next unfolding moment. Time makes itself known in small, almost courteous ways. A familiar path feels shorter than it once did. A task that once took an hour now takes a little longer, yet it carries the same sense of completion. Change does not arrive with force. It settles in quietly, asking only to be noticed. With this noticing comes a gentle shift in what feels important. Urgency loses its sharp edge. What endures begins to stand out. The activities that remain part of daily life, year after year, take on greater weight simply because they persist. Their value is proven through loyalty rather than intensity. There is a quiet wisdom in this persistence. It teaches patience without instruction. It shows that fulfillment does not depend on constant expansion or achievement. It depends on depth. On staying close enough to one's own life to feel how it is actually unfolding. People here rarely speak of finding themselves. There is no sense that anything essential was missing to begin with. Identity forms through accumulation, shaped by choices that felt appropriate at the time they were made. Looking back, there is coherence. Not because life followed a plan, but because attention was given along the way. This attention becomes a form of discipline, though it never feels strict. It guides decisions about when to continue and when to stop. It informs what deserves care and what can be released. Over time, external rules fall away, replaced by internal understanding. The body reflects this understanding. Signals grow clearer. Hunger, fatigue, and tension announce themselves early. Response replaces reaction. Care replaces control. The body is treated as a long-term companion, not a problem to solve or a system to optimize. Acceptance takes root here, but it is not passive. It is paired with responsiveness. What cannot be changed is met without struggle. What can be influenced is approached patiently. Energy is spent where it can actually make a difference. Emotional life follows the same pattern. Joy is allowed without clinging. Sadness is allowed without resistance. Feelings move through rather than settling permanently. The inner landscape remains open, flexible enough to hold contradiction without breaking. Relationships deepen within this openness. People learn one another's rhythms. They sense when to speak and when to remain quiet. Trust grows through consistency, reinforced by everyday reliability rather than declarations of intent. There is comfort in this reliability. Knowing what to expect from oneself and from others reduces strain. Life feels predictable enough to be safe, yet open enough to remain alive. Surprise is welcomed when it appears, but it is not required. As the day approaches its close once again, there is a familiar sense of readiness. Nothing needs to be stretched or rushed. The rhythm has carried what needed to be carried. The body feels gently tired, not depleted. The mind feels engaged, not crowded. Evening routines unfold as they always have. Small acts of care mark the transition. The day is set down carefully, without regret and without longing. Tomorrow is allowed to remain unknown. In the quiet before sleep, continuity becomes palpable. Life does not feel fragmented. It feels whole, even in its unevenness. The quiet force that has guided each step remains present, steady and unassuming, ready to be followed again when morning arrives. There comes a stage when effort and intention begin to overlap so completely that they are no longer felt as separate. Action flows without inner negotiation. What once required careful thought now unfolds with ease, guided by familiarity rather than force. The day opens again, and the body responds with quiet readiness. There is no sense of beginning from nothing. Momentum carries forward, built from years of moving in rhythm with what is possible. Decisions feel lighter because experience has already shaped them. Energy gathers where it is needed without being scattered. Attention sharpens without narrowing. Small details register clearly without demanding reaction. A change in weather is noticed. A shift in mood is felt. These signals are received calmly, integrated without urgency. Awareness becomes precise, not anxious. This sensitivity does not make life fragile. It strengthens adaptability. When circumstances change, responses adjust smoothly. There is no attachment to how things used to be. What worked before is respected, but it is not defended at the expense of what works now. Adaptation becomes one of the most sustaining qualities of life. It allows continuity without rigidity. The rhythm remains even as its expression evolves. Days change shape, but they do not lose coherence. Purpose, at this point, feels less like something to pursue and more like something to inhabit. It no longer needs to be questioned. It reveals itself through ease. Through the absence of inner resistance. Through the quiet sense of being appropriately placed within the flow of life. There is relief in this inhabiting. The pressure to define oneself dissolves. Identity feels stable without being fixed. Change can occur without disorientation. Roles may fade or transform, yet the core remains recognizable. This stability reshapes how uncertainty is held. The future no longer appears as a threat requiring control. It feels like a continuation that will be met the same way past moments were met, with attention and care. Trust replaces anxiety, not because outcomes are guaranteed, but because the process has proven reliable. Loss, when it arrives, is met with the same steadiness. Grief is felt fully, without resistance and without haste. It moves through at its own pace, supported by routine and connection. Nothing is forced into meaning before it is ready. Connection remains central. Relationships no longer depend on constant reinforcement. They endure through shared rhythm. Even when words are few, understanding persists. Presence communicates what explanation cannot. As years advance, the measure of a good day simplifies. Was there engagement? Was there care? Was there sufficient rest? The answers do not need to be perfect. Enough is enough. Evenings arrive gently, as they always have. Familiar closing rituals offer reassurance. They mark a pause within an ongoing movement rather than an ending. The day is released without attachment. In the stillness that follows, there is no urge to grasp at time. Life has not been something to hurry through. It has been something to occupy fully. Each day has added its quiet weight, contributing to a sense of fullness that does not rely on memory or anticipation. The quiet force guiding this way of living remains unchanged. It does not demand recognition. It does not promise reward. It continues steadily, offering direction through presence rather than instruction. A softness enters life that cannot be scheduled or designed. It arrives after years of moving with one's own limits rather than against them. The body stops arguing. The mind loosens its grip on alternatives. What remains is a quiet willingness to meet each day exactly as it appears. Morning light returns, familiar and unremarkable. It rests along the edges of the room, touching what it always touches. The body responds without debate. Rising no longer feels like a task to be negotiated. It feels like belonging, like stepping into a place already prepared. The hours unfold with a gentle predictability that feels supportive rather than dull. Familiar tasks return, altered slightly by circumstance, yet grounded in the same care. Attention settles quickly. There is less wandering now, not because curiosity has disappeared, but because it has found a place to rest. Movement continues, shaped by experience rather than urgency. Each action carries a sense of sufficiency. Nothing needs to be added to justify it. Nothing needs to be trimmed away. The act is complete in itself, held fully while it is happening. With this completeness comes a deep acceptance of impermanence. Objects wear down. Bodies change. People drift closer, then farther away. None of this feels abrupt anymore. Change has been present all along, absorbed gradually into the rhythm of life. Memory softens as well. The past is not revisited as a ledger of success or failure. It is held as texture, a collection of moments that shape the present without demanding explanation. Regret loosens its hold. Gratitude spreads outward, no longer tied to specific events, but to continuity itself. Conversation carries a different tone now. There is no urgency to be understood in a particular way. Words are offered honestly, without effort to impress. Listening deepens. Silence becomes generous. Connection feels less fragile because it no longer depends on performance. This ease extends inward. Self-criticism loses its sharpness. Expectations relax. There is room to be incomplete without feeling diminished. Effort remains, but it is guided by care rather than proof. Action arises from attention, not from pressure. Care becomes the quiet principle shaping everything. Care for the body through movement and rest. Care for the mind through restraint and focus. Care for others through presence rather than intervention. Care for time by not forcing it into shapes it cannot hold. As the day progresses, alignment requires no reinforcement. Choices flow from values that have been practiced long enough to feel instinctive. There is trust in this instinct, earned through years of listening to it closely. Uncertainty no longer demands resolution. It is recognized as a natural companion. Not knowing becomes another condition to respond to, not a problem to eliminate. The future remains open, but it does not press in. Evening arrives again, marked by gestures so familiar they barely register. The body slows. The mind releases the day without inventory. There is no counting of achievements. No review of shortcomings. The day is allowed to stand as it is. Night settles, carrying a deep sense of belonging to the ongoing movement of life. Nothing feels rushed toward an ending. Nothing feels suspended in waiting. There is only continuity, experienced moment by moment. The quiet force that has guided every step remains present, unchanged by age or circumstance. It has never pushed. It has never demanded. It has simply offered a steady direction, inviting participation without insistence. Days no longer present themselves as separate pieces. They feel like one extended movement, unfolding without clear edges. Morning, afternoon, and night still arrive, but they no longer divide experience. Life flows through them easily, carried by the same current that has always been there. Waking happens gently. The body knows when it is time. There is no internal debate, no sense of obligation pressing from the outside. Rising feels like a natural response to being alive, to having a place within the day that is already waiting. Even when energy is lower, there is no resentment toward the body. Its pace is accepted as information, not resistance. Time is experienced differently now. It no longer feels scarce or abundant. It feels present. Moments are not hurried through in anticipation of what comes next. They are entered fully, then released when they pass. Trust has replaced urgency. What needs attention reveals itself without being chased. This trust extends to life as a whole. There is no longer a need to measure it against ideals or imagined alternatives. Questions of whether it could have been different lose their weight. Enough has been present in countless small ways, repeated across years. Enough has accumulated quietly. Purpose, at this point, cannot be separated from living itself. It is no longer tied to a role, a task, or a contribution that can be named easily. It exists in the willingness to remain engaged, to respond to what is near, to care for what is within reach. Even when activity becomes minimal, presence remains active. The body continues to change, but it is accompanied rather than resisted. Movement may slow. Strength may lessen. Still, intention remains clear. Each action, however small, is taken with awareness. There is dignity in this care, in meeting the body as it is rather than holding it to what it once was. Relationships soften into quieter forms. Some faces appear less often. Others remain only in memory. Connection does not disappear. It settles inward, becoming part of the internal landscape. Love no longer depends on proximity. It has learned how to endure without constant contact. There is peace in this settling. Not the absence of pain, but the absence of struggle against it. Experience is allowed to move through without being turned into something to fix or resolve. Acceptance becomes active, shaped by years of attentive living. Evenings continue to arrive without ceremony. Small rituals remain, not because they are required, but because they feel right. They signal care. They mark continuity. The day is set down gently, without regret and without anticipation. Rest follows naturally. Sleep is welcomed as another phase of participation rather than a retreat from life. Even in stillness, there is belonging. Even in quiet, movement continues beneath the surface. Looking back, life does not resemble a story with sharp turns or dramatic peaks. It feels more like a landscape walked slowly and thoroughly. Familiar paths have gained depth through repetition. Each return has added meaning rather than diminished it. The quiet force that has guided this way of living never announces itself. It has been present in every ordinary choice, every small return, every decision to continue. It has not promised happiness or achievement. It has offered something steadier. It has offered a reason to wake. A reason to care. A reason to remain. And that has been enough.